we get a lot of prayer requests from people having some really hard times. And a lot of times what God does is He takes our hard times and He molds us and He shapes us into things that are much greater than what we were when we went into those hard times. And He turns them into things that you probably would never expect. So I wanted to take a moment and just make a video on one of those moments that I went through. That whole journey began in the spring of 2008. I was a science teacher in the Kansas City, Missouri school district. And I felt pretty confident going into that Great Recession we had that year that I was a safe teacher. I'd been there for a while. I was a science teacher. It was a highly needed category. And I got my contract for the following year. Come May, June, July, everything's still going great. By the middle of August, one day I got up and I went to the mailbox and I got a letter in a yellow envelope. I was being laid off. It was a very challenging time for me. I was the only breadwinner in our family, and I could literally count on two hands the hundreds of dollars that I had to make it for what I believed to be a full year of not working. Now, the reason I say that is because teachers, they generally apply for jobs in April, May. If you don't have a job by June, you're kind of bumming. But this is the middle of August. And now we're also hitting the Great Recession. In 2008, there were 80,000 teachers nationwide laid off. I was one of them. And every district in the state of Missouri was either having a hiring freeze or laying teachers off. So I went the whole year without a job. And I did a lot of things to make ends meet, and I made it, and I have a great story about that. Most of that has to do with tithing and the promises of God to deliver me through. But what that led me to was in the spring, I was offered the opportunity to go to Harlem in New York City and help open a charter school with a group of really brilliant educators. Now, the problem that I had with going to Harlem was I lived in Kansas City. So the only way I could pull it off is with my sister's help. She worked for an airline and she made me her buddy, and I was able to fly back and forth between Kansas City and New York City for around $50 for a round trip ticket. But I had to fly standby, and that's awfully terrible in itself as well. I ended up being in Harlem for 13 months, and throughout that time I did 140 flights. I flew almost every Friday and Sunday. And that summer we all built a school. Ironically, it happened to be the same summer that the book Waiting for Superman came out, which is about a group of educators opening up a charter school in Harlem. Kind of found that ironic because that's exactly what we were doing. And we proceeded to open up a school. But I also needed housing. Initially, my plan was to get very cheap housing because this particular position paid more than double of what I made as a teacher. So the intentions were to kind of be like a migrant worker. I was going to go to New York City. I was going to work for a lot of money, live for super cheap, and send it back to Kansas City. So my goal was to find super cheap housing in a terrible neighborhood. I didn't care how awful it was. It was just me. I didn't have to put my family there, so it was just me. I didn't really care. What I discovered is the worst housing in New York City is like $2,300 a month. So right away I was kind of hit with this shock. Now when I first got there, I was staying with my sister's dad in the Upper West Side. Now it's kind of weird. It's my sister's dad. We have the same mom, different dad. It's always a confusing story to tell about him, so I just called him my cousin. So I stayed with my cousin in the Upper West Side, but that was very temporary. I had to get out pretty quick. Now, what I decided to do was, again, the help of my sister. At the time, she, again, was a flight attendant, but she was living in Los Angeles. And for about 9 years, she lived on a boat. She bought a boat and put it in a marina in Los Angeles and lived there for about 9 years. So what I did was I bought a 38-foot wooden sailboat for $1,800 on eBay. And I sailed it from Cape May, New Jersey to Atlantic City, and I had to pull in there for a storm. About a month later, I got it all the way to really the Statue of Liberty at the Liberty Landing Marina, which is where I lived. And I lived on this boat starting in November. The greatest thing about living at the Liberty Landing Marina was watching World Trade go up right outside my window, as well as I took the ferry from the Liberty Landing Marina to World Trade, and I walked past it every day. One of my most memorable moments walking past it was early in the morning, and when I walked past World Trade, there was all sorts of police and military, and there was news reporters everywhere, and I asked a cop, "What's going on?" And he said, "Didn't you hear Osama bin Laden was shot?" And I thought how ironic that I'd be standing at the World Trade Center when I hear that news. So that was just really cool, watching that thing go from nothing. I think when I moved there, it was 12 stories tall. And by the time I left, it was fully built. It was awesome watching it go up. Living on a boat throughout the winter in New York City and teaching at Harlem kind of built inside of me what I would refer to as like a true grit. It really hardened me. I was putting together the science curriculum and I was the main science teacher, but also on top of that, I worked as what was referred to as the student support coordinator, but I was essentially the dean. I was the one that took care of all discipline. And Harlem was a very violent place. At no point did I really fear for my safety. There was one point where there was a fight with a knife in it, but the kid just threw it out the window once I showed up. But I never really feared for myself. I've broken up hundreds and hundreds of fights throughout my years of teaching, and I've never really been injured at all. I feel like God has gifted me with the gift of diffusing violence. So I was a great fit in Harlem. The only thing that really did was I kind of started to grow real numb to verbal abuse, a lot of verbal abuse, strangely mostly from parents, but I had to kind of just grow numb to that and just not care anymore. And honestly, that helps me make YouTube videos because I get a lot of negative responses, but that, you know, again, it's not, nobody's throwing anything like a parent in Harlem will throw at me. But I grew as an educator and I grew as an administrator as well. It really tested me because not only was I living on a boat and then somehow making my way from the Statue of Liberty to Harlem every day where I would discipline kids and somehow teach science classes as well. But every single Friday I would scramble to get to the airport and I would hopefully be taken off before the night's over. And I always generally made it. I had a pretty good streak. I think out of all the weekends I was in New York City, I think I missed maybe 4 that I wasn't able to get home. But overall, I made it home every weekend. It was really challenging. So when I got done with New York City, the following school year, they offered me a job. But right away, I just knew I just can't keep doing this. This was designed to help open the school, and then I was going to leave. And I realized I can't stay. So I made my way back to Kansas City, and then at that point, Kansas City was hiring teachers again, so I got on back to Kansas City. But what that whole thing did to me was it transformed me. It made me such a different person, and I would have never done any of that stuff had I not been laid off. It's by far one of the most grandest adventures I've ever had in my life. I could probably write a book on the adventures I had in New York City. Beautiful place. Some of my best friends in the entire world I've met in New York City. As a matter of fact, I've often told my friends in New York City and Kansas City, if for some reason I had an emergency and needed a friend, I think I'd probably have friends from New York City fly here to help me before I'd have friends from here to help me, but maybe I'm wrong on that. So I wanted to make this video, just essentially reach out to the people that are suffering, the people that are struggling, that, look for those things. I definitely encourage you to lean on God and trust in God. That's the thing that got me through that first year of not having any job, was I tithed, and God promises that He opens up the windows of heaven and pours out such a blessing that He can't hold it all. And He says even test Him in that. And I leaned on that. That's what I leaned on the whole year, and He certainly proved Himself in that. And then this other experience just transformed me. I was a better leader. I'm better at making hard decisions. A lot of times people at my current job say, man, your job must be really hard making those really tough decisions. And a lot of it was because of the durability that was built in Harlem. Harlem's a wonderful place. It's a beautiful, culturally wonderful place that has delicious food and interesting music and sports and history. And man, I just felt like I was part of a historical moment. It almost felt like a Forrest Gump moment going there, and I think we should always look for those times. So I hope this video helps a lot of people, and if you like it, click like and subscribe. You can also now find us at godfamilyandguns.org, on Facebook, and also on Full30, and all those links are below. If you feel called to support this channel, our Patreon link is also below. But the most important part of this YouTube channel is we take prayer requests, so never hesitate to send that stuff in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.